Welcome, everybody. This is a long-awaited session of the council, a special meeting of the council, to conduct interviews with the three finalists for the town manager's position. I'd like to thank the search committee. We have a member of the search committee here, Karen Chavez. They did an excellent job interviewing and making recommendations to the council or to myself. And I, in turn, will make a appointment to the council for their approval. Michael Lombardo was our first interviewer. He's the current town manager in Hamilton, Massachusetts. And Michael, I'll let you open up with an opening to give folks an idea, just an overview. And then we'll begin the questioning. I've asked each of the councilors to prepare questions. I wanted to see them to make sure that we have a good balance of questions.
Sure.
So you'll get at least 2 questions from each councilor, and those same identical questions will be asked of each candidate that we interview tonight.
I just want to be clear for the record, I left Hamilton in April, so no longer with Hamilton.
Past tense.
Past tense. But I have spent more than 2 decades in local government, working in cities, towns, counties, very small governments, as well as much larger. The city of Iowa City had a population of 67,000. So I've seen the spectrum of local government services from a lot of different angles. I've been in positions where you see it from a much higher level, working with the council at a much higher policy level, to a very hands-on daily level, such as in Hamilton, where you're chief cook and bottle washer, as well as town manager day to day. I'm looking forward to your questions. I know there's a lot and not a lot of time. I want to make sure that we have time for back and forth. So happy to answer questions or ask questions.
Okay. Heather, can we begin with you?
Sure.
That's the first question.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
So my first question is, as town manager, how will you measure and evaluate the performance of town departments? And similarly, how do you expect to be overseen and evaluated as town manager?
So in terms of evaluating town services, it really comes down to, is there a culture of collecting data and metrics for evaluation? If not, and that's something that there's an interest in, and then there's a whole process for developing those measures, vetting them, making sure that you're comparing year to year, apples to apples type comparisons. Where there's not, it's a more say anecdotal or I've used surveys in the past where we've surveyed internally or surveyed externally, kind of how we're doing type thing, and you take that and year to year compare, and you have pretty soon a track record of the direction in which your services are going. A full-on performance evaluation system is a lot of work. It requires a lot of data collecting. I think the key to that is to try and winnow it down to a handful or more of key metrics that make sense, that really tell the story that you're looking to hear, and then making sure that the data is collected ongoing. Because if you wait every year and then do a look back, then the data is outdated, and you're caught looking back as opposed to evaluating as you go and then looking forward. So if that's something that is in place, great. If not, then going through the process to find those measures and start discussing them. The second question is, in terms of the town manager, how is town manager evaluated?
Yeah, I can repeat that. How would you expect to be overseen and evaluated as town manager?
Overseeing with council, I believe it's a daily and weekly kind of check-in. You have a big board, and so it's a challenge to stay in touch, but it's getting to understand each and every one of the board members and council members, and making sure that you're hitting that cadence of being in touch and understanding kind of where we are. This annual look back to me is, again, it's much like the performance metrics. Waiting a year to then kind of reflect back on how we're doing, to me, really doesn't drive home or doesn't give us the opportunity to improve along the way. So I like a weekly and monthly check-in with, board members or council members, understanding where there are hot button issues and addressing it as we go. And then if there is in place an annual evaluation, then that really should be a reflection of the year, as opposed to kind of this new aha or gotcha moment. And I believe that for staff as well. If I sit down with a staff person and they're hearing it for the first time, that's a big challenge. Should understand as we go what's working, what's not, give us a chance to correct it, work together as a council and manager to kind of understand, are we heading in the right direction, and if not, that gives us opportunities for mid-course correction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Linda?
Is it one question at a time? Is that
Yes.
what you're going to do? Okay. As you know, and I'm sure everyone knows, the opioid crisis is at epidemic levels. And how supportive are you in terms of like recovery programs, recovery coaches, and that type of situation?
Very supportive. In the Midwest, where I worked for some years, the drug of choice was methamphetamines, and we had a very large problem in Allegheny County, working with the Department of Public Health, making sure that there are programs in place, as well as putting together funding and an approach when you discover these meth houses to rehabilitate them and get them back into habitable form. So I'm very, very supportive of recovery and rehabilitation. Opioids are tough. The recidivism can be very tough. They're readily accessible, and it's a tremendous crisis. But everybody deserves a shot at a future and at recovering from the addiction.
Have you had experience with this at the last where you were before, as far as dealing with? Did you have any programs?
We did have in the county that had a fairly expansive county public health system. We worked very closely to develop programs there. They have a director. It's a quasi-state agency in the state of Michigan, and so fairly autonomous, but we did work together on budget. We worked together on identifying kind of the broader issues, and then on disaster response, we worked together in terms of vetting those programs and coordinating.
Winthrop worked very hard in creating employees, two recovery coaches as becoming employees of the town of Winthrop.
Great.
And we went through a lot of vetting, as you must imagine, and a lot of it was liability and a lot of different things, insurance, this and that. But we kind of got through all of that, and we reached a point where we were able to hire two recovery coaches and offer them full-time positions. However, they have now moved on to other jobs.
Yeah.
And so now we're in a position where, we need the support to try to find, locate two other recovery coaches. And they feel that we need two because they feel we should have a female and a male, just so that people are comfortable with the people that they speak to.
Sure.
So, we work closely with the public health department on that as well.
I'll say it's for smaller town governments, it's innovative and kind of right out there on the front edge. You don't see that.
Yeah, we're kind of like the
progressive
first in the state to do this, so we're kind of like,
Yeah.
leading the way, so to speak. So
And that's when how good people get hired away. You're the training ground. You set up something new. That's unfortunate, but I'm sure there are good counselors out
okay.
there.
Thank you.
Jimmy?
If I can't, I can't. But just to follow up on, because you had mentioned Michigan when you were talking about, you've just been in Hamilton for 7 years?
8 years.
8 years?
Yeah.
Was there any program like that in Hamilton?
No.
No. So many cities and towns, you have that separation between school and town. And we've worked very hard over the last several years to really try to bridge that and make it, we're one town with a
Sure.
great school system and a great DPW and police and fire. Can you talk a little bit about some of your past experiences in working with school systems, how that's worked out, what your knowledge is of the school systems, budgetary process and such?
Yeah, I've always had a great working relationship with the schools in the towns that I've managed. In Hamilton, they have a regional school district, so really much more separate and autonomous. It's a separate elected school committee. and their budget is passed through, whatever the school committee adopts, it's passed through in the town budget to town meeting in Hamilton's case. But the superintendent, Mike Harvey, and his business agent, Jeff Sands, and I, as well as the town manager and Wenham, met usually monthly, sometimes more frequently, sometimes a little bit less, to talk about kind of the lay of the land, broader high-level issues. Where is the town going budgetarily or financially, so that they have a glimpse of kind of what the budget process is going to look like. It's a challenge in that in communities where it was an actual municipal agency, then you're working on a much closer basis, week to week, month to month. And I think that there's better understanding of the operating budget and how things are being spent, how funds are being spent. But throughout my career, I've had a great relationship. In Iowa City, there's a much larger school system. Superintendent there was ACES. We met regularly to discuss big picture issues. We coordinated on things like IT and human resources. And so I worked the gamut of that relationship. I think it's 2/3 of the budget, and so if you go into the budget session without a strong kind of collaboration there, you're setting yourself up for challenges when funds are tight, and you've got to make corrections with the budget. So I believe in making that a regular process, getting to know the school and their needs, and then working with the council to set the course for the future and identify what funds we can make available for them.
So you just said 2/3 of the budget. So what's the school budget in Hamilton and that versus the town? The school operating budget versus the town?
Hamilton's portion of it was about 20. Their budget was about 30 million. Hamilton's portion was about 20 million, and then the town budget was 10 million in Hamilton. So $30 million budget overall, 20 million which is schools.
30. Okay. Wow. Thank you.
Michael?
Okay. As town manager, you'll hold the most important leadership role in our community. How will you create a culture of open dialogue, compromise, and a solution-based approach within departments and the community at large?
Sure. I work with an open door policy. I believe in regular meetings with the management team, relaying to them the direction, policy level direction set by the council, and making sure that I'm the conduit or liaison between that in terms of getting it implemented with the departments. I believe in really understanding the challenges that they face on whatever level they're comfortable talking about it. But when it comes to town services, truly understanding what we're trying to accomplish and what are the needs to help accomplish that. I've been in mentoring roles with newer department heads. I've worked with seasoned department heads that have earned their stripes long before I came to town management. I've always had very good, cordial working relationships with my department head. Where not, I've set corrective action plans for department heads that were underperforming in certain areas, and given them opportunity to rise above and overcome those challenges. And where that's been successful, we've celebrated that. Where it's not, then have helped transition them onto other positions.
And what for, that covers that departments pretty well. What about for the community at large?
For the community at large, we live in a new age where information is hitting you from all directions. And in Hamilton, we worked really hard over the last year and a half to 2 years to overhaul the website. We have a much stronger social media presence. And so it's synthesizing the information that you're getting from across those platforms, bringing it forward, making sure that's part of the dialogue with the council, in that instance, the Board of Selectmen. Surveying is another tool that we've used to hear from the community. And a lot of folks, my number memorized. I fielded calls all the time from the community. They were not shy about input and letting me know kind of where they think things stand on any number of service issues. The key is, I think, bringing that forward and making sure that I'm not the only ears that information falls upon, that we're discussing that there's a portion of the community, whether when you're in a more urban area like this, sometimes neighborhoods coalesce around certain issues, making sure that we're hearing that and discussing that and how that may or may not influence our services, where we're going for the future, what the needs of the community are, and are there things that we need to identify budgetarily or service-wide to address those.
Thank you.
Councilor McDuffie.
Yeah, your answer to Mike's question kind of dovetails into what I was going to speak about, which is that this is not an elected position, but you still will be answering to the people. This is a small community, and as you correctly stated earlier about social media and stuff, there's a lot of input. You will be getting a lot of input from the townspeople. And so my question to you is, do you have any intention to move to Winthrop and relocate if you get this position? Because that is something that has come up amongst my constituents.
Sure.
They feel that in the past, the town manager has not been in tune with them and can make decisions that aren't affecting him directly or his family. And that separates him from the population in some degree. So I'm concerned about that, and I wonder if you have any intentions to do that.
So in every community but Hamilton, I've lived in the community I've managed, and there I live in Wenham, which is
the next
partner in
town.
crime right next door. Truth be told, I had an offer on a house in Hamilton because I believe strongly in it. I'm in a bit of a challenging situation here because I have a rising senior. Today, in fact, was my son's last day as a junior, and so moving him to a new high school in his senior year is not something that would be good for him, but certainly willing to discuss that and consider for the future. I have no problem with that if that's a strong desire from the council. I know it's not a requirement, but I do have to get my son through his senior year before that can even become an option.
No,
It's
again,
not a requirement according to the town chapter.
Sure.
right, it's not a stipulation, it's, and I appreciate, your consideration of your family. But that was something I wanted to bring up.
Sure, thank you. And very nice to meet you, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Nick LaConte couldn't be here this evening, our counselor from Precinct 3. He has an ongoing commitment on Monday night, but he did submit some questions. I'm going to ask you one. And I know you've had experience coming around town, driving around town and Googling and checking in with our meetings and so forth. So this is about vision. What is your vision for Winthrop, and what specific values will help you drive towards that vision?
I think any town manager runs into a challenging situation if he sets his own vision for the town. I think my process, my responsibility is to understand collectively the vision of the town and how do I help shepherd the path forward. So to say that I come with an agenda or a vision for Winthrop, I would say I don't specifically. I do know that there's been some management challenges of late. We discussed them at the first interview. I want to make sure that we're running a tight ship, that we have the right people in the right seats on the bus, making sure that there is a level of trust and comfort with the management team and with the town overall, but using my skills and my experience to help shepherd and build consensus around the future if there isn't one, and then shepherd kind of the process towards accomplishing that.
Thank you.
Winthrop has significant capital needs. By way of example, the town buildings, especially the fire stations, roads and sidewalks, and water and sewer infrastructure are all in need of major improvements and or replacement. Similarly, several DPW trucks were recently taken out of service because they were in such bad repair they couldn't pass the state inspection. how would you approach the task of improving the town's ability to maintain, repair, and replace capital assets?
It's important to do kind of an assessment of where your rolling stock is, what the infrastructure status is across all the buildings, and develop a solid 5-year capital plan, 3 to 5 years. And then advocating and making sure that funding is available to bring that rolling stock and the buildings up to snuff. It's New England is challenged. We have governments that have been institutionalized for a very long time, and the infrastructure is outdated. In Hamilton, I advocated for 2 $5 million bond issues, $10 million total, to upgrade the water infrastructure. The average age was somewhere between 60 and 70 years old at the time. We had water main problems all over the place. But building the case and advocating for the resources where you can. If not, then finding interesting ways through lease option programs for rolling stock. But you've got to get the stock up to a certain level so that they can perform their jobs. Having drivers and workers and no trucks doesn't work well.
Thank you.
Okay, so mine is a little similar, but not quite the same. Revenue is a major obstacle in our town. Do you have any innovative ideas on how to prepare for and deal with the rising costs at just about every level?
This question came up at the first interview, and I think, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that you've explored a lot of revenue options. And so the state provides, a certain basket of ways in which we can raise revenue, and I would be surprised if Winthrop hasn't explored many, if not all of them. I think where you can in business districts, if there are no authorities or spending districts that you can develop, that's a consideration. But as I mentioned in my first interview, I think the challenge there is no matter how you slice it, taxpayers are going to see it as an added tax. And so if there are uncharted waters and we can find new revenue sources, I think that's worth exploring. But I think, too, that we have to be very careful that the community is receptive to those options, because, as I said, it's going to be viewed as an added tax. And the better conversation could very well be, how do we live within our means? Are there ways to pare down our budget and spending plan to still deliver great services? But having that dialogue and understanding kind of where, in terms of, to answer your question directly, I've worked with value-added taxes and development fees, so that as new development takes place, they're paying some funds up front then to help offset the cost of infrastructure, or the cost that the burden that they're putting on the town. I've done special taxing districts to put lighting and streetscaping in. So I've done a fair amount of that throughout my career, but what is available here, it would take a little bit of time to figure that out.
Okay, and just to finalize that, how is your financial experience? Do you have significant financial experience?
Sure. My graduate degree was in local government finance. I have a strong budgetary background. I've worked the budget from all angles. I was the finance director and assistant city manager in Augusta, Maine when I started out. And so, yes, I have extensive background. And prior to that, I was in commercial banking for another lifetime.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just if I can ask a follow-up to Councilor England's question. You mentioned that you had gotten two $5 million bonds for water infrastructure. Can you just explain what you were able to get done for $10 million? And like you had said, how the pipes were 60 to 75 years old. What percentage of the town, and were these just small projects?
We did annually, on average, about $1.2 million a year, and I think they're finishing up the last of the monies this year, or there may be a small amount left for next year. So I would say approximately 20 to 30% of the infrastructure was upgraded. In Hamilton, they had dead loops where hydrants with bleeders on them and pouring over 10 million gallons of finished water into the ground just to keep circulation and keep bad chemicals from building up and ending up in people's houses. So there was a focus, and they're much more expensive to connect the loop. So, but somewhere on the order of 20 to 30% of the pipe in the ground was replaced.
Okay, so have you had a situation in your past, well, let's do a little background here. So we've recently built a new middle school, high school, and we have a vacant building, and we built some new elementary schools 15, 20 years ago and had a vacant building there. And the process on both of them seems to be always taking longer than the citizens would like, and I'm sure as the council would like too. Have you had a situation where you have had vacant town properties in one of your lifetimes here, and how did you deal with it? How did it end up? What kind of development came out of it, and how did the process work?
Augusta, Maine, we had a great project, Old City Hall, right across from the new town City Hall complex, was vacant for some years. Working closely with the city manager and the economic development director, we put together a package for funding and working with a construction partner to turn that into senior housing. So taking a former brick, old classic town hall and making it into senior living center. Also in Allegan County, they had just, I was there to help finish the 60,000 square foot public health building. They had several buildings vacant then, and we repurposed those for the county's needs and moved. The campus downtown was primarily courts. We moved all the administrative functions up, renovated the buildings and moved the administrative functions up to the other north campus there.
And just to follow up on that, in Hamilton, do they have a town planner, or have you worked with a town planner?
Yeah, we had a part-time planning coordinator when I arrived there. I think about 4 to 5 years ago, I was able to make that position full-time, and they now have a full-time, true planning director, oversees a couple other departments, but then provides direct planning functions for the town.
Thank you.
Well,
Alrighty. For most of Winthrop's history, it's been an isolated hidden gem. But the pressures of a booming Metro Boston economy and housing market have brought many new people, ideas, and opportunities to Winthrop. How will you approach economic development and modernization while honoring Winthrop's traditions?
Economic development is always a challenge because invariably you read in that growth. Where you're largely built out, growth can only mean going up here and possibly tearing down some older homes and buildings. That's generally in New England not a very popular approach, and so you're challenged. And so I would ask it, is there a community-wide consensus around development and what comes with that? If not, I think it's important to bridge that gap and have that dialogue to make sure that both at the municipal level and community level they're in sync with the future. Otherwise, it's fraught with a lot of pain and battles. I've been in communities where they were eager for development and would not think about tearing down buildings to put new, but they don't have charters and constitutions that go back centuries, and so very different mindset there around development. But Augusta, Maine is I'd say somewhat similar to Winthrop in that it's a urban center. It's in New England and deals with a lot of the same mindset and pressures. The downtown had several vacant storefronts, and so then working with developers, working with economic development, we set up TIF districts to finance redevelopment of dilapidated buildings and storefronts. Second stories were largely vacant, trying to get occupants in that. So have direct experience working those issues.
And just as a follow-up to that too, with just general modernization. So people will look at, New England as,
Sure.
something that's never changed and can be very provincial at times. But how do you take a place like, say, Hamilton or Winthrop into the modern era?
Yeah, IT is the basis for it, and in Hamilton, we went through a 2-year process to overhaul the town website, integrate social media. We were in the process of something similar. I don't know if you all use See Click Fix here, but it's an app that you can have on your phone where the residents can report pothole manhole covers missing or other issues. They're just in the process of trying to integrate that there. So really lending voice to the citizens in new ways, making sure that the IT backbone in town is there that can handle it, and then making sure that you have a process on the back end for follow-up to those reports of broken windows and manhole cover missing, so that you're building trust and confidence that the work is getting done.
Thank you.
Councilor Guthrie.
Okay, Michael, all Michaels. You mentioned earlier about your private business experience in banking, which is, I'm sure, very valuable, and financial issues are paramount to the subsequent decisions off of that. So my opinion, private business experience is really important in your spot, because the interaction between developers, you mentioned earlier, which I was happy to see, it almost dovetails once again into Michael's question, that your experience with developers and developing properties, bearing in mind that that's public, monies and public properties, as opposed to this private experience that these developers are going to be under, with a time frame and a schedule and a mission and a financial window of profitability. I've heard some of my constituents mention that they are worried that these developers are going to come in and kind of take advantage of us. We need a guy who's going to represent us in a powerful way, be tough with these developers, but at the same time be accommodating to these developers and not drive them away while this opportunity exists. So I'm concerned about your leadership qualities in those areas, and I'd like you to speak about that.
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges for developers is the whole process for getting permits.
Right.
I've been in communities where it could take a year or more just to get your building permit. That's a heck of a long time. I've been in communities too where we've streamlined process, worked out redundant steps, where we were issuing basic permits in 45 to 60 days. And so I think if development is something that's to be embraced, then making sure you have a process internally for vetting the applications, reviewing them, and making sure that they get turned around timely and that construction permits are available in a reasonable time frame. A year, 2 years, I would argue, in a community that is looking for development, that's not timely. So foremost, it's making sure that you're prepared in-house to handle that process and handle it professionally and responsibly. But as I mentioned previously, I've worked with both in banking and in local government with developers, with contractors on all different levels. That 60,000 square foot building that we put up in Michigan, then turned around, renovated probably another 12,000 square feet. I had a facilities director, but I was there on the site regularly, checking in, just making sure that they understood that I was watching, that I was present.
Yep.
And asking the questions that I needed to of my facilities director to make sure that the project is delivered on time and as we expected it to be.
Thank you.
I have another one from Councilor Conti. Can you describe a situation in the past in which you took bold action, innovated a new solution, and/or managed a diverse team towards an end goal?
That's a great question. A couple different things that I'll describe. One, foremost, not in terms of a bold direction, but I think it required a lot of the same skill set, and that is, I was on the job for 2 weeks in Iowa City as city managers, and it started raining somewhere along those 2 weeks, and by week 3, we were in a situation where we were sandbagging neighborhoods to keep the water out, that the forecast was dire, and that we would need to evacuate homes. There was no emergency evacuation provision in the city at the time, and so I'll never forget this. It was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I was down in this one peninsula neighborhood. We had a sandbag levee of about 1.2 miles wrapping this neighborhood, and it was probably average of 6 to 7 feet tall. And the mayor and I went down just to see how preparations were coming. I looked over the levee, and the water was perhaps 6 to 10 inches from the top. And it became very clear that we were going to be addressing something very different and quickly. So the mayor and I went back to City Hall, had a long conversation about the weather forecast, and I advocated strongly for emergency evacuation provision, which we then had to use to evacuate some 250 homes. And, within, I think it was the next night, if not the next after that. That was not a popular decision. Iowa City is a very kind of government hands-off community, and so making sure that residents and our public safety professionals were safe was priority one for me. Working with the university, making sure that we were helping them with their evacuation plans as well. But that was an instance where identifying a problem and a solution, advocating strongly for it, and then following it through implementation. Those houses were inundated up to the second floor eaves, and I'm proud to say that we had no swift water rescues, no loss of life, no major injuries through the course of that. In other situations, usually one of the first things I do when I come to a new position is kind of evaluate how things are working internally. What's the structure? Are the reporting structures in place? Do they make sense for efficient operations? And so advocating for restructuring where needed, and the often challenging circumstances that come out of that, because people get attached to their positions and the structure where they fall on a tree. I've shepherded those processes in a couple of the different positions that I've been in. Iowa City, in particular Hamilton, a fairly significant restructuring there, and in Michigan as well, where we shuffled the departments around, created a management team, which I rely on for day-to-day operations and coordination, but making sure that the structure is in place to support those efficient operations, and then the process of getting everybody acclimated and trained under that new regime.
I'll ask one final question myself. We're kind of a unique community where we have two quasi-public agencies that operate they're both adjacent to the town of Winthrop. That's Massport and the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, both of which we have mitigation packages that we go 10 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be. And from time to time, there are issues that come up. I guess, give me a sense of how you would work in that role as, the top administrator in this community, and at the same time, have some type of rapport or such with that agency as well.
Sure. It's important to make that connection early. They're a major presence and can create a lot of challenges for the town when their infrastructure is lacking, or projects that they're going to be doing is going to affect neighborhoods and access to the community being a peninsula. So I would reach out within the first few weeks to get to know the key players at both of those organizations, talking to our state representatives about the issues, and making sure that we're identifying early on what some of the challenges are and help working with the council formulate a process and a plan for addressing those. Not waiting till something blows up, but understand what their plans are for the future are, and then working it early in the process. I know having the airport in your backyard is presented challenges. I know you've been advocates on their noise reduction committees as well. That's a big problem throughout the North Shore now as well. I can only imagine, what it took to make inroads there. I think, that same process of making sure that you're talking to the right players there, that you're identifying the problems and the challenges up front, and then pushing for solutions and using your state representatives to make sure that your voice doesn't fall on deaf ears.
Very good. Michael, I'll give you an opportunity to wrap it up and give us a summation, anything you'd like to say, or any questions you'd like to ask any of the councilors.
Well, there was one question, and then I'm happy to wrap. And it's come up in a few different instances of your questions. And I'm curious, do you feel that there is a consensus around the future direction for Winthrop, both at the council level and at the community level? When we talk about development, do you believe that there's a consensus for what that means for the town, or is that in kind of the fledgling stages?
I'll take a shot at that one. I think there's a general consensus that we need development for the town, because we need revenue, additional revenue. The question is, how much, how fast? And I guess probably the biggest obstacle in the past has been communications with individual residents and individual neighborhoods. And that's really the big challenge for this council, is to open up the channels of communication with individual neighborhoods that are going to be impacted by areas that we could potentially do some development. And if we can partner there, if we can get them comfortable, I'm sure that we can reach a point where there's some type of solution to how much we're going to build out.
Yeah.
I think we've seen it at meetings where the blows have been kind of softer when they come in, they understand, that we took a couple of steps backwards maybe 6 months ago or a year ago. So, and I think they're very open with this new council to try to open the process up. And I think if we do that, if we maintain the openness and listen to, and when we talk to developers, the first thing we tell them, go into the neighborhoods. Don't go in after the drawings are made. Go in before, sit down, have coffee, bring them into your area and tell them what your plans are. Get their input, because 9 times out of 10, it's not the project itself, it's the approach the developer took in trying to make it happen.
Yeah. I would say if they don't have neighborhood associations, as the municipal side of it, working to help get them established so that you have somebody that you have directly liaison is probably a good opportunity for you there. I'm sorry, you were looking for others?
No, I mean, I'll just say that, we talk about development, it's really redevelopment, I think, because we don't have a lot of open space, it's all space that's being redeveloped. And I think there is a consensus that, we need some sort of development. Everybody wants it, nobody wants it next to them. Everybody thinks it's a great idea over there or over there. But I mean, I think, there's a need for increased revenues, and there's a lot of discussion on what's the best way, the best approach to take it. But like you mentioned about infrastructure, a lot of our development depends upon the infrastructure. A lot of it can't go forward until we fix some of the infrastructure. So it's like, it's like the little hamster running in the wheel trying to catch ourselves. So it's tough.
I was going to add that there's a lot of sentiment of what exactly, I think we've all come to the realization that something needs to happen or something needs to change or be redeveloped, but it's just in what sense. Is it going to be like a typical New England seaside community where we have tourists that come from the airport or the city of Boston who come and share our community with us, or is it a bedroom community like we've always been and more dense and more traffic? And it's really, you use the word shepherd, it's really about shepherding that conversation, that process is kind of where we're at, is how do we have this dialogue with everybody and lay out the choices which we have and build some sort of consensus amongst the choices that we have.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited about the prospects of interviewing for the position, and I'm hopeful that I'll move on. So thank you all very much. And if other questions come up in the room, I know there are a couple of folks who couldn't make it tonight. Happy to field those. If you'd like to reach out, I can do that too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.